The sun burned low over the horizon, spilling a golden haze across the rolling plains. Dust carried the scent of dry earth, and in the distance, the call of a lone hawk sliced through the fading day. This was no man's land, no bustling town, no railway whistle echoing across the valley. This was Apache land, silent, wide, and untamed. And at the edge of that silence stood a girl. Her name was Nayeli, young but strong, her black hair braided tight with strands of red cloth from her mother's shawl. She was not like the others in her tribe, where her people clung to the safety of tradition. Nayeli carried a restless spirit, a need to carve her own place in a world that seemed determined to bury the Apache beneath. Shadows of history. She had chosen a lake wide, still and shimmering with the last light of the evening. The villagers called it the Lake of Silent Echoes, a place wrapped in whispers and fear. They said that when the wind turned cold and the water grew black, you could hear voices, the voices of those who never left, of the spirits that lived beneath its glassy surface. Most Apache never went near it. They lit fires far from its shores, refused to hunt along its banks, and prayed for those who dared to cross it. But Nayeli was not afraid. For her, the lake was more than a legend. It was an escape, a promise, a place untouched by men's greed or the settlers' rifles. Here she would build something of her own, a home not handed down through bloodlines, not decided by chiefs or warriors, but built by her own two hands. With nothing but determination, she began. She gathered timber from fallen trees along the ridge, stones from the shallow creek bed, and clay from the lakeshore. Her fingers were raw by the time she pressed the first mud into place, but she smiled through the pain. Each wall that rose was a declaration. This is mine. This is where I belong. The days were long, the nights longer. Coyotes sang in the distance. Owls cried from the woods, and every so often the lake would ripple though no wind blew across it. Sometimes, when Nayeli's arms grew tired, she would pause and listen. She thought she heard laughter, faint, broken, carried by the water like a forgotten memory. Other times, it was the sharp wail of a cry, gone before she could be sure it was real. Her heart would hammer, her breath catch, but she always returned to her work. Fear would not stop her. When the house finally took shape, small but sturdy, she stood back and studied it. Smoke curled from the chimney she had built, and inside, a fire burned warm against the chill of the evening. For the first time, Nayeli felt what her heart had longed for, a sense of belonging, of owning a piece of the vast world. But the lake watched. Its glassy surface seemed to shift with every step she took. When she walked the shoreline, she swore she saw something move beneath the water, a shadow too big for fish, too slow for drifting branches. At night, she woke to sounds, faint footsteps, hushed voices, the groan of timber beneath unseen weight. And always, her gaze fell to the bridge. The bridge stood crooked and forgotten, a wooden skeleton stretching from one end of the lake to the other. No one used it anymore. The settlers had abandoned it when the new rail lines were laid. The Apache avoided it altogether, but Nayeli felt it, the weight of its presence, the sense that beneath its beams lay something more than mud and water, something waiting, something watching. And as the moon rose, painting silver across the rippling lake, Nayeli whispered to herself, though no one was near enough to hear, "This is my home now. Whatever you are, You will not drive me away. The wind carried a chill across the water that night, sharper than any knife. Nayeli lay on her mat inside the small house she had built, her fire flickering low. Outside, the crickets should have been singing, the coyotes should have been howling, but there was nothing, only silence. A silence so heavy it pressed against her chest like a stone, and then came the sound. It was faint at first, like the rustle of reeds bending in the breeze. Nayeli sat upright, her dark eyes darting toward the small window. The lake stretched out like black glass, still as death. Yet she heard it again, a sound that didn't belong, a laugh, high, quick, childlike. Her breath caught. The fire popped, showering sparks against the hearth, and she flinched at the noise. Nayeli told herself it was only the night playing tricks, but the sound grew clearer, drifting across the water like smoke. It wasn't the laugh of a living child. It was hollow, broken, carrying a sadness that chilled her more than fear itself. She grabbed her torch, thrusting it into the flames until it roared to life. Pushing open the door, she stepped into the night air. The torch crackled in her hand, throwing long shadows across the dirt and grass. The lake looked endless in the moonlight, silver and black, stretching far beyond where her torchlight reached. She stood still, listening. Nothing. Just silence again. She nearly turned back inside when it came once more. Not a laugh this time, but a cry. A sharp, ragged wail that twisted into the wind and vanished. Her skin prickled. The sound was coming from near the bridge. The bridge was old, sagging under its own weight. The settlers had built it long ago to cross wagons and cattle, and though its beams were cracked and weathered, it still reached from one side of the lake to the other. Now, in the pale light, it looked like a skeleton laid across the water, its ribs jutting up where the planks had rotted away. Nayeli's heart hammered as she walked closer. Each step brought the cries sharper, clearer. Her mind raced. Was it an animal, wounded and trapped? Or worse, a person calling for help? She thought of travelers who vanished in the night, of whispers about spirits bound to the lake, unable to rest. She stopped at the edge of the bridge. The torchlight licked at its underside, showing broken beams and pools of shadow. The water rippled faintly below, disturbed by something unseen. "Who's there?" she called, her voice steady, though fear coiled in her stomach like a snake. No answer, only silence. Then, just as she leaned closer, something shifted in the water. A shape, quick, dark, vanishing beneath the bridge before she could make it out. The cry came again, echoing from beneath the planks. Her instincts screamed at her to run, but her curiosity rooted her to the spot. She peered down once more, but the water only stared back, reflecting her torch like a single red eye. The cry stopped. The night fell silent again, heavier than before. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Nayeli finally turned, retreating toward her house. But she felt it, a gaze fixed on her, following her every step. She shut the door, barred it with wood, and pressed her back against it, her torch still burning in her hand. Her grandmother's words whispered in her memory. "Some lakes don't hold water, child. They hold souls." For the first time, Nayeli wondered if she had chosen the wrong place to call home. And yet, in her heart, she knew something else. Whatever lived beneath that bridge wasn't done with her yet. The next morning, the sun rose over the lake in a wash of copper light. Birds stirred in the reeds, and a thin mist clung to the surface of the water. Nayeli had barely slept. Her torch had burned down to ash, and her thoughts had circled endlessly around the sounds she'd heard near the bridge. She stepped outside to breathe the cool air when she noticed something unusual. Hoofbeats. They came slow and steady, echoing across the valley floor. A lone rider emerged from the haze, tall in the saddle, a wide-brimmed hat. His coat was worn, dust clinging to every fold, and the rifle strapped to his back told the story of a man who had seen too many battles. Nayeli stiffened. Cowboys seldom came here, and when they did, they brought trouble. The horse stopped at the edge of her clearing. The rider leaned forward, his eyes scanning the small house, the lake behind it, and finally her. "You built this place?" he asked, his voice gravelly, tired. Nayel. I nodded, keeping her distance. "I did." He swung down from the saddle, boots crunching against the dirt. "Name's Silas Boone," he said, tipping his hat. "And you've built on cursed ground." Nayeli frowned. "Cursed?" Silas glanced at the lake, his jaw tightening. "This water don't belong to the living. Folks tried to tame it long before you. Settlers, trappers, even outlaws. None of 'em lasted. The lake, it don't let people stay." Nayeli crossed her arms, standing firm. "I'm not afraid of stories." "Stories?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I've seen men vanish out there, heard screams in the night that froze my blood. Once, I even heard my brother call my name, but he's been dead 10 years. Her heart skipped. The memory of last night's cries clawed at her mind. "You're lying," she whispered. Silas studied her face, reading the tremor in her voice. "I ain't. Whatever's under that bridge don't rest easy, and it don't like company." The wind stirred between them, rippling across the water. For a moment, Nayeli thought she heard it again. A faint laugh carried on the breeze. She masked her fear with anger. "Why are you here, then, if you believe all this?" Silas's eyes softened, though the lines on his face remained hard. "Because places like this, they call to me. And because I reckon you don't know what you've stepped into." He turned back toward his horse, tightening the reins. "I'll give you a piece of advice. Girl, leave. Find another stretch of land. Build another house. Don't let this lake swallow you whole." But Nayeli shook her head. "This is my home. I won't run." Silas paused, one boot in the stirrup. He gave her a long look, as though weighing whether she was brave or foolish. Finally he said, "Then remember this when water starts speaking. It ain't the living that's doing the talking." With that, he mounted his horse, spurred it gently, and rode back into the mist, leaving Nayeli alone with the echo of his words. She stood still, her torch from the night before nothing more than a charred stick in her hand. The lake rippled once more, though no wind blew across it, and in the shadows of the bridge something shifted, watching her, waiting for nightfall. The night fell heavy over the valley, a velvet shroud pierced only by the pale light of the moon. The lake stretched wide and still, its surface a mirror that refused to break. Nayeli sat inside her small house, staring into the fire, Silas Boone's words echoing in her mind. "When water starts speaking, it ain't the living that's doing the talking." She tried to steady her breathing, but curiosity gnawed at her. The whispers, the cries, the shifting shadows, they weren't the tricks of her imagination. Something lived beneath that bridge, something the world had chosen to forget. By midnight, her decision was made. Nayeli wrapped herself in a shawl, took a fresh torch, and stepped into the night. The cold bit at her skin as she walked, each step crunching against the frost-hardened earth. The closer she came to the bridge, the stronger the air felt, thick, heavy, like walking into a storm that hadn't yet broken. The bridge loomed above her, its timbers sagging, its nails rusted red. From below, it looked less like a structure and more like the ribcage of some long-dead beast, its bones rotting into the water. Na raised the torch high, crouching as she entered the shadows beneath. At first, there was only the smell, damp wood, stagnant water, and something metallic, sharp, like rusted iron. She ran her fingers across one of the posts and drew back sharply. Her fingertips glistened dark red in the FIRELIGHT. Not fresh, but not forgotten either. Her stomach twisted as she looked closer. The wood bore stains soaked deep into its grain. She moved further in, her torch casting long, jagged shadows across the beams. And then she saw it, wedged between two planks, half buried in mud. A pouch, small, leather, weathered by time. Nayeli hesitated before pulling it free. The leather cracked as she opened it, and inside lay a necklace, Apache made, strung with turquoise and bone. But the beads were cracked, and the leather cord was stiff with dried blood. Her breath shuddered. She had seen necklaces like this before, worn by young women of her people. The sight made her chest ache with dread. Then came the sound. A cry, long and low, echoing across the beams. Nayeli froze, clutching the pouch tight. The cry swelled, not from one voice, but many layers of sorrow, rage, and anguish bound together. The torchlight flickered violently, as if the air itself trembled with the sound. Her eyes darted to the water, and there it was again, movement. A shadow shifting beneath the surface, rising, circling. She tried to focus, but the shape twisted, impossible to define. Her instincts screamed at her to run, yet her feet refused to move. She felt rooted to the earth, her heartbeat pounding like war drums. Suddenly, the cries stopped. The silence that followed was worse, suffocating, as though the entire valley held its breath. Nayeli staggered backward, clutching the torch and the blood-stained necklace. She stumbled into the open air, gasping as the cold hit her lungs. The bridge loomed behind her like a watchful sentinel, its shadows deeper than before. She turned and fled, running back toward her home. But even as she slammed the door shut and dropped the torch into the hearth, she felt it. Something had a work, and now it would not rest. The necklace lay heavy in Nayeli's hands, its turquoise beads cracked, its cord stiff with time. She turned it over in the firelight, her mind restless. Whose blood had stained it? Whose voice had cried from beneath the bridge? By dawn, her decision was made. She needed answers. That morning, she walked toward the elder's lodge. Her grandfather, Tahu, was one of the oldest men in the tribe. His back bent, his eyes clouded, but his memory sharp as the edge of a blade. He sat by a small fire outside, carving a piece of wood when she approached. "Grandfather," Nayeli said softly, kneeling beside him. Tahu looked at her, his eyes narrowing. "You've seen something," he said, before she could speak. Nayeli nodded and placed the necklace in his trembling hands. The old man froze. His thumb brushed across the turquoise, and for a long moment he said nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse. I had hoped you would never find this. Nayeli's stomach tightened. Whose was it? Tahu's gaze drifted toward the lake, its waters glinting in the morning sun. Long ago, before you were born, before even your mother's time, this land was not silent. The settlers built their bridge, their wagons rolled across it, and their cattle drank from the water. But they wanted more. They wanted all of it. His knife slipped from his hand as he continued, voice trembling with old grief. One night, a war broke out. Apache warriors fought to defend this valley. Arrows flew, rifles cracked, blood stained the water. Nayeli swallowed hard, remembering the stains she had touched beneath the bridge. And the necklace. Tahu's eyes darkened. It belonged to a girl, young, not much older than you. She was caught when the settlers raided. They dragged her beneath that bridge. Some say they tried to make an example of her, to break our spirit. She screamed until the night grew silent. When the sun rose, she was gone. Only her necklace remained, found in the mud. The elders buried it, hoping her spirit would rest. Nayeli's hand flew to her mouth. But she doesn't rest. No, Tahu whispered. Her cries have haunted that lake ever since. Some hear her laughter, some her screams. Others say she pulls the guilty into the water. The settlers left, but her spirit stayed. She waits under that bridge, bound to the place where her life was stolen. The fire cracked between them. Nayeli felt the weight of the truth pressing down on her chest. She looked at the necklace again, the cord frayed, the beads broken, the blood forever etched into its fibers. This wasn't just a relic. It was a wound, still bleeding through time. Why didn't you tell me before I built my home here? She asked, her voice sharp with anger and fear. Tahu's eyes filled with sorrow. Because I thought the land had grown quiet. Years passed with no voices, no cries. I believed the girl's spirit had finally faded. His shoulders sagged. But it seems she has awakened. And now she has chosen you. The words struck her like a blow. Nayeli rose, clutching the necklace close. The lake shimmered in the distance, and she felt the pull of its dark waters deep in her chest. She had wanted a home, a place to belong. Instead, she had unearthed a story soaked in blood, a story that refused to stay buried, and the dead were not done with her yet. The days that followed were restless. Nayeli barely slept, her nights haunted by the faint cries that rolled from the bridge whenever the moon was high. She tried to ignore them, tried to lose herself in tending the fire, fetching water, mending her clothes. But each time she touched the necklace, the air grew heavy, and her heart thudded with the certainty that the spirit beneath the bridge was waiting. On the third evening, as the sun melted into the horizon and shadows stretched long across the valley, she heard hoofbeats again. Silas Boone rode into the clearing, his horse snorting clouds of dust. His eyes, dark and weary, swept over her house and the lake beyond it. He dismounted, slowly, boots crunching against the earth. "You found something, didn't you?" he asked without preamble. Nahal's hand tightened around the necklace hanging from her belt. "How do you know?" Silas took off his hat, rubbing the brim between calloused fingers. "Because I've been here before, more times than I care to count. That bridge, it calls to people, shows them what they don't want to see." Nayeli narrowed her eyes. "You spoke of your brother. Was he taken here?" Silas's jaw clenched. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he nodded. We were just boys when we crossed that bridge. He slipped, fell into the water. I tried to pull him out, but something held him under. He never came back up. His voice cracked, a rare fracture in his weathered tone. I heard his screams for years after, whenever I passed this way. Same as you hear now. The words chilled her, yet they bound her to him. For the first time, she realized she wasn't alone in the torment. Silas studied her face. "Show me what you found." Reluctantly, Nayeli drew out the pouch and placed the blood-stained necklace in his hands. Silas stared at it, his expression hardening. "This belonged to one of yours," he murmured. "I've seen trinkets like it before, in raids, in skirmishes. Never thought I'd hold one stained like this." Nayeli's voice wavered. "She was murdered beneath that bridge. My grandfather told me. Her spirit has never rested." Silas looked at the necklace, then at the bridge, where the last light of day bled into shadow. "Then maybe it's time we face her, together." Her breath hitched. "You want to go there? At night?" "I've run from this place long enough," Silas said firmly. "If your spirit wants justice, maybe she'll speak it plain. Maybe we'll both get the answers we've been avoiding." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of the lake. Its surface rippled, though no stone touched it. Nayeli felt the pull in her chest, the same pull she'd felt since finding the necklace. She met Silas's eyes, their weariness mirrored in her own. Slowly, she nodded. "Tonight, then." As the stars bled into the sky, the two of them stood side by side at the edge of the bridge, torches blazing in their hands. The water below churned, restless, as if anticipating their arrival. The night was alive with whispers, low and mournful, winding through the beams like threads of smoke. Nayeli clutched the necklace to her chest. Silas drew his revolver, though he knew bullets would do little against the dead together. They stepped beneath the bridge. The air grew colder. The water rippled. And then, in the reflection of the torchlight on the lake, a face appeared, pale, hollow-eyed, framed by black hair drifting like seaweed. The spirit had come. The air beneath the bridge was thick, damp, and heavy with silence. The flames of their torches flickered violently, as if resisting the unseen presence pressing in around them. Nayeli's heart hammered in her chest, but she forced her gaze toward the water. The face lingered there, a girl's face, pale, with dark eyes that seemed bottomless. "The turquoise necklace around her ghostly throat," Nayeli whispered, her voice trembling but clear. The water stirred, and the reflection's lips parted. At first, only a low, mournful wail spilled into the night, a sound that raised the hair on both their necks. Then, slowly, words formed in the mist that rose from the water. "They came for me. Under this bridge, I was taken, forgotten." The voice was broken, fractured like glass. Nayeli took a step forward, torchlight catching the damp beams of the bridge. "I know your story. My grandfather told me. You were attacked when the settlers raided." The spirit's eyes glowed faintly. "Not settlers." Silas stiffened, the torch trembling in his grip. "What do you mean, not settlers?" The girl's face flickered, her form wavering as though the water itself resisted her truth. Then her voice sharpened, cutting through the night. "It was one of your own." Nayeli's breath caught. "Apache." The spirit's hollow gaze locked onto hers. "Betrayal. One of us led them here, gave them names, gave them paths. And when they came for me, he did not stop them. He watched, The ground seemed to tilt beneath Nayeli's feet. "Who?" she demanded. The spirit's cry rose again, echoing off the beams of the bridge, until it felt as though the entire valley shuddered. "The blood is not just theirs, it is ours. My death was not only by their hand, it was sealed by betrayal from within." Silas cursed under his breath, his grip tightening on his revolver, though it could do nothing against the dead. "I knew men back then. Men who'd switch sides if it kept their own hides safe. Apache trackers who sold out their own kin to the army. I seen it." Nayeli's stomach churned. She thought of her grandfather's sorrowful eyes, the way his voice had trembled when he told her the story. Had he left something out? Or had he, too, been betrayed? The spirit surged, her voice louder now, no longer just mournful but furious. The water splashed violently, lashing against the rocks. "The bridge holds my blood, my screams, my shame. Until the truth is spoken, until the betrayal is named, I cannot rest." Nayeli raised the necklace high, her voice breaking with desperation. "Tell me how to set you free." For the first time, the spirit's gaze softened, as if recognizing the weight of Nayeli's heart. "Uncover the traitor. Speak his name to the fire. Only then will the curse end." And with that, the face dissolved, the water smoothing into glass once more. Silence fell heavy under the bridge, broken only by the hiss of their torches. Nayeli's hands trembled as she lowered the necklace. Her entire world had shifted in the space of a few breaths. The story wasn't just about a girl murdered by strangers. It was about betrayal, rooted in her own people's bloodline. Silas glanced at her, his weathered features grim. "Looks like your answers are buried deeper than either of us thought." Nayeli nodded, tears burning her eyes. She had come to build a home by the lake. Instead, she had unearthed a truth that threatened to tear her family's history apart. And now, she knew the spirit would never rest until that truth was spoken aloud. The night after the spirit's revelation, Nayeli sat by her fire, unable to eat or rest. The necklace lay before her, its cracked turquoise glowing faintly in the flames. Betrayal, the word cut deeper than any knife. Somewhere in her bloodline, someone had abandoned their people, and that choice had condemned the girl beneath the bridge. Her grandfather's sorrowful words echoed in her mind. "I had hoped you would never find this." Was it guilt she had heard in his voice? Or only fear? By dawn, she had her answer. Nayeli sought out Tahu the Elder, her grandfather. He sat in the lodge, wrapped in furs, his eyes clouded but sharp when they found her. "You've spoken with her," he rasped. It wasn't a question. Nayeli's throat tightened. "She told me the truth, that it wasn't just the settlers. Someone among us betrayed her. Someone gave her to them." For a long time, the old man said nothing. His hands shook slightly on his walking stick. Finally, he whispered, "Yes." The word hollowed her chest. "Who?" Tahu closed his eyes, pain etched into the lines of his weathered face. "It was my brother, your great-uncle. He feared the soldiers, feared their guns, their horses. They promised him safety, land, food. He gave them what they wanted, names, paths, and her. He thought it would save us. Instead, it destroyed us." Nayeli staggered back, her hands clenching. "And you never spoke it aloud." His eyes glistened. "What would it have changed? He was family, blood. I could not bear to name him a traitor. So I buried the truth, and with it her spirit. Naeli's chest burned with fury and grief. And now she cannot rest, because you chose silence. The old man bowed his head. Then do what I could not. Speak it. That night, Naeli and Silas stood once more beneath the bridge. The moon was high, its light painting the water silver. The necklace dangled in Naeli's hand, its beads gleaming. She lit a fire at the water's edge, its flames snapping and clawing at the darkness. Raising her voice, she cried out, "Spirit of the bridge, I know the truth. You were not only betrayed by enemies, but by one of our own. It was Tahu's brother, my blood, who gave you away. His name was Hakan. He chose safety over honor, and your life was the price." The fire roared higher, the water churning violently. A scream split the night, rising from the depths and echoing across the valley. Silas held his ground, revolver drawn though useless, his eyes locked on the shifting water. The ghostly face rose again, her eyes burning with fury, then softening into sorrow. At last, she whispered, "At last the truth is spoken." The necklace snapped in Naeli's hand, the beads scattering into the flames. The fire surged, towering skyward, before collapsing into embers. The water stilled, the cries faded, and for the first time, silence wrapped around the bridge like a blanket. The spirit was gone. Naeli fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. Silas rested a hand on her shoulder. "You did what no one else could. You gave her peace." She nodded weakly, staring at the calm lake. The land, once haunted by cries of the forgotten, now felt quiet, free by morning. The valley seemed brighter, the air lighter. Birds sang where silence had once lingered. The house by the lake no longer felt cursed. It felt like home. And beneath the bridge, only the whisper of water remained, no longer screams, but a song of peace.